version of the software, and it'll come back with possible
Awesome. Well, sounds good. Thank you so much. So everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. So this particular session is Pawning Networks, an introduction to network pen testing. So I don't know about you, but I'm excited about seeing this one. This particular session is going to cover a lot of great hands-on tools. And as we were talking about, you've got an excellent instructor here. So please, if you will, use the chat. If you've got some questions, I'm going to be helping moderate. So if you can't see some of your questions, he'll ping me and he'll say, hey, do we have anything? And I can ask him some of your questions. Also use Discord. Discord we're heavily using this year to make sure that we get an opportunity to chat and have good conversations. So without further ado, Philip Wiley is going to be educating you on pawning networks through pen testing. So take it away, my friend.
Hey, thanks for the warm introduction, and welcome everyone to this session. Hope everyone is enjoying the conference. So far, Joseph's been known to put on some really good conferences, and we're fortunate to have all these virtual conferences with the social isolation. The previous conference that Joseph did back in May, I guess, or so, was pretty cool, and also got the Red Team Village coming up in August, I guess, around DEF CON time. But at any rate, thank you for joining. Not only do I work as a pen tester, I've been working as a dedicated pen tester for a little over 8 years now. I had my OSCP for a little over 7 years, but I'm the Red Team lead at a large global consumer products manufacturing company. And I'm also the adjunct professor at Richland College. I teach ethical hacking and web app pen testing there. I like to teach workshops and plan to do more in the future. So just keep your eyes out, hopefully come up with some new topics. And tomorrow, if you haven't registered, I'm doing a web app pen testing workshop tomorrow. And these are entry-level introduction courses that teach you some of the basics and how to get into, get started in pen testing. And I'll share some educational resources. But I'm also the founder of the Pwn School Project, which is an educational meetup, which started out was mainly offensive security topics, but it's kind of changed over the years. I mean, we've only been around almost 2 years, but it's changed as time's gone on because there were a lot of people trying to get into security in general, so we don't restrict it to just hacking type of talks. We expanded it past that, but we have our recordings online on our YouTube page, and we stream 2 meetings a month, so that information's out there. So I've been in IT and information security for a little over 22 years. I'm also the co-host of the Uncommon Journey podcast with Alyssa Miller and Chloe Mustagi, and I was one of the people interviewed for the Tribe of Hackers Red Team book. So what really got me into presenting at conferences and doing workshops was my passion to share and teach. When I got into, after I've been in pen testing a while, some people wanted to ask me questions on how to study for the OSCP, so I started sharing information. So that got me interested in teaching, so I'm able to do that on a broader scale now. And so we're going to cover some methodology, go over some methodology information here. And so if you haven't checked out, pentest-standard.org is for the PTEST standard, the Penetration Testing Execution Standard. And this is a really great standard to go by for your pen testing. This takes you from beginning to end of the pen test, and it's written by a lot of great people that you've probably heard of in the industry. Dave Kennedy is one of the writers from Trusted Sec, as well as Carlos Perez from Trusted Sec, Joe McCrae that does a lot of training at conferences and online, and numerous others. So this was built by experts in the industry. It wasn't just someone that put together a list that wasn't experts. It was people that actually have been doing this in the field hands-on, and some of the best around. And also some other good methodologies and information to look at is the OWASP Top 10 and the OWASP Testing Guide. So these, if you need to learn a little more about web app pen testing, these are good resources there and a good place to learn the OWASP Top 10. If you want to get into pen testing, one of the things you'll go through in a job interview is notoriously the vulnerabilities that you get asked about, whether it's specializing in web app pen testing or just a normal generalist pen test job where your main focus is going to be networks. They're still going to ask you about SQL injection and cross-site scripting, the different types, and how to remediate. So just knowing those are really good for interviews, just knowing that information. And so the P-TEST methodology, you have your pre-engagement interactions, intelligence gathering, threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, exploitation, post-exploitation, and reporting. But as you're getting started out as a pen tester, a lot of the pre-engagement interactions are going to be ran by practice leads or engagement managers. They're going to work with clients to collect information to scope a pen test. And so as a pen tester, you'll be more likely involved on like the kickoff calls and some of the meetings for the pen test. But typically when you're getting started out, someone else is running those, collecting that information. So when you're getting started, you're gonna be more focused on intelligence gathering down through reporting. And in this, we're going to focus more on intelligence gathering, not so much on threat modeling, but vulnerability analysis and exploitation, and discuss post-exploitation and reporting. Threat modeling, some of this is just, as you learn to pen test, a lot of this just comes naturally. You kind of, from hacking systems and doing pen tests, you kind of know the areas to look for. So like in your more advanced targets, like if you're wanting to test like an ATM machine, then that gets a little more tricky, because then you're looking at, not only you're looking at the ways you can hack the system, you're also looking at the environments this system's hosted in. So if you're looking at an ATM machine that resides somewhere out in the country that's no one is monitoring it 24 hours a day, there's not a lot of traffic, then physical attacks are going to be more likely. Whereas if it's in a heavily populated place, more your logical type of attacks, less trying to break into it physically, are going to occur. So you're taking that target, and you're also taking in consideration the environment. And so this, you go through and you'll look at what you're testing, you'll look at the different threat surfaces that you can possibly attack, and try to kind of map out your pen test. Because where you're doing application or network, it's really not as big of a requirement. It's kind of a little more loosely done. In your vulnerability analysis, you're going through any information you've collected during your intelligence gathering and seeing if there's anything that's vulnerable, as well as doing any kind of scanning to collect more information. Exploitation is where you're actually hacking into the system. So this is where the fun part starts. So you go through and hack the system, and post-exploitation is what you can do past exploiting that one system.
Hey, Philip.
Yes.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you, buddy. The slides are not advancing. So if you're on the first slide, that's all we're seeing. We're actually just seeing your slide sorter view.
Can you see it now?
No, it hasn't updated yet.
Okay, let me go back and reshare this.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, let me just go ahead.
All right, sorry about that, folks.
So that way you can see the URLs. And after, message me on Discord. I'm pretty frequent on that Discord, so you can send me a direct message or message me in the chats in general. But here are the resources that I was mentioning there: the pen test standard, OWASP top 10. And these are really good resources, and they're referred in a lot of different training and books. And here's the P-TEST methodology. As I said, we're going to be focusing more on from the intelligence gathering down to the post-exploitation, and kind of a simplified methodology. This is just very basic: your intelligence gathering, your reconnaissance against that target, vulnerability analysis, and exploitation. And within that, post-exploitation as well. So your intelligence gathering, you're gathering information against your target. And this could be going to, if it's externally facing, then you've got companies like Netcraft that have online sites that you can look up information on targets, mainly web application based, or websites. You can find out what system it's being hosted on, what all frameworks are running on it. Is this IIS running ASPX, or is this a Apache Tomcat server running Java server pages? So you're able to collect that information. And Shodan's another good tool to use during this phase. I was doing a pen test several years ago as a full scope pen test, more of an adversary simulation, because everything was open, including physical and any kind of social engineering, any of that type of stuff. And so doing a look up in Shodan, the IP addresses and stuff, I was able to look up network blocks and find out IP addresses that were in scope. We only knew the address of the company, the name of the company, so we had to really research to find any IP addresses to test. And during that test, I was able to find a FTP header on an FTP server that wasn't listed in any of those blocks. And how I found it is Shodan found like a banner for the FTP server, and I was able to find that server. So that was a clear text FTP server on the internet. And so Shodan was able to find this. So your reconnaissance and your OSINT is very, very helpful. Going through LinkedIn, different social media platforms, looking up information. So if you see openings for, sysadmins or DevSecOps people, network people, then a lot of times you'll see what systems they're requiring you to understand. So if they're a Cisco shop, they're going to be looking for Cisco certifications or experience in different Cisco products. So you can go through there and find that information, and possibly even find versions of the software and stuff they're running, as well as if you look up people that work for the company, they may have in their job description all the things they do. They want this populated because if they're in the market for a job or they're looking to upgrade, then their information's out there. So sometimes they give a lot of detail, so this could be used during your pen test. So the more information you collect there, the better. And once you move on to the targets and you're on the network, your Nmap scans and your vulnerability scans can collect more information on those targets. So the more information you collect, the more chances you have of hacking into something. So this is kind of going from like, you look at the different types of target knowledge. And so you look at more of an adversarial type simulation, or a lot of your pen tests you'll have like IP addresses or a domain name, and that's it. And you test from there. So the more information you collect on it, the more knowledge that you've got to attack that target. That's like if you took someone that works for the company doing internal pen tests, then they understand the environment better than a consultant would, or a contractor coming and test the environment. So they've already collected information. So it's up to someone from the outside that's not part of that company to do a lot more manual collection to be able to test that system. And so there's different types of open source intelligence. You have passive, semi-passive, and active. So your passive is collecting from the sites like LinkedIn, something that's not touching that target. And then like Netcraft, semi-passive, you're starting to get into your DNS lookups and stuff, and really high level scans. And you get into your active information gathering where you're doing your port scans and stuff. This kind of gets more into your reconnaissance and less away from OSINT specific. So like we said, collecting information is going to help you be more successful on your target. And that's one of the things too. If you're studying for the OSCP, one of the big things that people mess up on when they attempt the exam, maybe they'll pass it the first time around, is they didn't collect enough information. So that's what you want to do. So this comes into play like in your vulnerability analysis. We're doing more of this information. You're doing port scanning, service scanning, application OS enumeration, and vulnerability detection. So while your vulnerability scanners like Nexpose, OpenVAS, and Nessus find those vulnerabilities, it's also good to know how to manually collect that information. So how to manually detect those vulnerabilities, because there's times one vulnerability scanner will find something that another one doesn't, and vice versa. And sometimes some manual tools will find things like Nikto, for instance. I've ran Nikto on several pen tests, and it's a command line tool for testing web servers and web applications. And I've been able to find like default credentials and stuff through one of those scans that Nessus didn't pick up. So the more tools you have, the better. So you want to use all tools available to you and keep an open mind, constantly learning new things. And so vulnerability analysis, you're looking at for the network, you're looking at port and service scanning with Nmap. Typo on there, it should be Nmap, not Nmap, but Nmap and MassScan. Also, the Metasploit framework, there's a lot of auxiliary scanners in there that you can do to look for anonymous FTP and different vulnerable services. So that's a really good tool to have your disposal. It's not always about exploitation with Metasploit. There's a lot of discovery that you can do with that. And then your NSE scripts, your Nmap scripting engine scripts. The Vuln script in particular is nice because you're able to go through and run your scans. And what Vuln does is Vuln will run a script and looks for vulnerabilities, and it'll actually look for the open source vulnerability database numbers, so you can look up more information and possibly look up exploits for those vulnerabilities. And then your vulnerability scanning is important. If you're doing a pen test, you hear people before they get into the industry, they think vulnerability scanning is cheating. But what happens on a pen test is you typically don't have enough time to do it all manually. So your vulnerability scanners, they're able to detect stuff easily. So you want the low-hanging fruit, the stuff you can find quickly. That way you can get that out of the way, and you can find some information there that you're able to focus your attacks closer. Like I said, the manual testing is important as well, but you don't want to rule out using your vulnerability scanners. And also for the web, there's your dynamic application, your DAST, your dynamic application security testing scanners, which AppScan, Web Inspect, Acunetics, NetSparker, and Arachne. And the commercial version of Burp Suite has a vulnerability scanner built in, as well as OWASP Zap has a built-in vulnerability scanner for web application. Although, the focus of this is network, when you're doing testing, the endpoint solutions companies are getting better about securing stuff. So sometimes web or wireless are some of the best ways to get in, because sometimes the applications aren't as locked down. So those are areas that you can try to break into. And then Burp and Zap are also what you refer to as interception proxies. You're able to intercept that traffic, manipulate traffic, and you're able to take something and replay certain HTTP requests and see if you get errors. And those errors sometimes will give you information that leads to vulnerabilities that you can exploit in that system. And then man-in-the-middle proxy is another one. It's basically a command line proxy, but that one you can monitor the HTTP traffic as you're going along. And also, as far as along the lines too, your Wireshark tools, running Wireshark where you're running a pen test, any kind of sniffers, T-Shark, to see the way things are reacting to your scanning on the network. And then some more of the open source tools you have out there in Nikto, as I mentioned, WP Scan if you're testing WordPress sites. And so this is a good tool. You actually can get database information, credentials. You can actually brute force passwords, all sorts of good information there, and it'll find vulnerable plugins. And this is something that that a lot of times is a good way to hack into a site if they're using WordPress due to insecurity WordPress plugins. And then W3AF is another tool that's a command line vulnerability scanner. You can launch like the Java interface to it, but it sometimes can crash a lot. So it's kind of better at times to run the command line version of this. And when you're using W3AF, limit the amount of options you're doing. Do your reconnaissance first. There's options that you do everything at once, and when you do that, the system gets overwhelmed and the application crashes. So that one you just have to approach with extreme care. And then SQL Map is a good one for SQL injection. This is a really good tool for testing SQL injection. And if you're doing your vulnerability scans, if you find something, it's good to validate your vulnerabilities. Because when you're doing your vulnerability scans, you also want to make sure that you're doing validation. Because a lot of times these scanners, they'll find false positives. So you want to go in and validate these vulnerabilities to make sure they're vulnerabilities before you try to exploit them. Once you validate them, then you can move on to the exploitation phase. And so SQL Map is a good way to validate your SQL injection vulnerabilities. And Dirbuster, Derby, and GoBuster are good tools for discovering directories on a web server or a website. Sometimes there's information on there that they don't want exposed to the public. You could find administrative directories, files. You can find files on there that may contain, configuration information or usernames and passwords. So going and looking through those directories, doing your directory brute forcing is a really good way to collect information for your pen test. And then exploitation, here's some good tools for your exploitation phase. Exploit DB, you've gone through your vulnerability analysis, you found some vulnerable versions, then you go to exploit DB and you're able to go through and look up exploits for that system. You do a search on the vulnerable operating system or software, and it'll come back, and you want to make sure to put the vulnerability information in, the version of the software, and it'll come back with possible exploits. And there's also a command line version of that called Searchsploit. It's a script that's on Kali Linux and other pen testing distros like Parrot OS, and it searches a locally hosted repo of the exploit DB, the exploit database. So you're able to access those exploits in your system, because sometimes you're doing internal pen test. It gets tricky to download those exploits. You may have to connect through a mobile device that you have to download, go off their network, and that sort of thing. But if you have them locally, then sometimes that can save you time, and you can also search on your system for that exploit. And then the Metasploit framework, we've mentioned before. This is not manual. Some of the stuff's automated for it, but you can use it for manual and automated testing. And this is an exploit framework. And usually a lot of the popular exploits, they're Rapid7, other people that support the community, the application from a community standpoint will convert exploits over to a Metasploit module. So this is a really good place to look, and sometimes you're easy targets. And one of the things that some people want to avoid being a script kiddie, or they're worried about something being too automated and it's not elite. But one thing you got to remember, if you're doing a pen test, you want to find the vulnerabilities as quick as you can. Use your time as best as possible. While you're learning this, you want to learn the manual and automated methods. But when you're on a test, then your time's limited. Sometimes you may have a week to cover a lot of IP addresses. So the more you're able to make good use of your time, the better off you are. And plus, this is like you don't have a lot of options out there when it comes to exploit frameworks. A lot of the other exploit frameworks like Core Impact, those are not free, and there's no free version or community version of it. So those can be pretty expensive. But if you got the luxury of your company's got the luxury you do of using Nexpose and Metasploit together, then that kind of they work kind of hand in hand. So if you find something in Nexpose, you're able to more easily exploit it with Metasploit Pro. So those are good options there. So sometimes automating things, even writing scripts to automate some of your tasks, like your Nmap scans, there's different tools out there you can use to do that with, like the Unicorn scan or Magic Unicorn by TrustedSec. It helps automate some of your tasks as well. Okay. Now we'll try to see if I can get my lab up and running here.
Hey, Philip, quick question for you. There's been a lot of questioning and kind of clamoring for any links. Is there anything they need to download? Anything that we need to get to them while we're going through this?
Yeah, the VMs aren't up there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the tools, and once I get it uploaded, then actually what we're using, if you have Metasploitable 3 set up, that's what I'm using. Metasploitable 2 and 3 are the vulnerable VMs I'm going to use. So that, if they got Kali Linux, if they don't have that, I know a lot of people have run into trouble creating the Metasploit 3 VM. It's built on Windows. And so there's a script out there to build it with, but I will share that VM later. So really what we're going to do here is more or less kind of give you an overview of the tools and then give you access to point you in the right direction of the stuff you need to practice on your own time.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks. Okay. So I'm trying to get my lab up here running real quick so we can.
So we're not seeing any, only thing we're seeing on screen is end of slideshow. Click to exit.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm trying to get my lab connecting here at home.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know if you were sharing desktop.
Yeah, everybody stand by for a minute or two here while Philip gets his presentation or the VMs up and starts showing us that. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to ask it here or ask it in the Discord channel.
Yeah, sometimes these live demos.
Did you do your proper sacrifices to the demo gods?
I don't think I sacrificed enough chickens.
Oh no. We'll hope that they're not looking today. How about that?
Okay, let's hope so. Okay. Yeah, what happened was my lab I have set up at home was updating and rebooted, and one of the wireless network cards wasn't working, so I had to plug in a USB wireless card to get this set up. So looks like things may cooperate. Fingers crossed.
Fingers, toes, whatever you need to cross it.
Yeah, one of the things I've decided in the future is to set up cloud instances of stuff instead, because
yeah, I got you.
That way it makes it easier for.
And never update before a demo.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the advantage of putting some stuff online too makes it easier. People don't have to download it. So there's sites like Try Hack Me that you can put stuff on and people can do it virtually online.
Yeah. Someone said hail to the demo gods. Absolutely. All right, so a couple of questions out here. Obviously, nothing on screen right now. We know this. We are in the process of fixing it. Kali 2020.2 has Metasploit 5.0.8.7 was a comment. There's also another comment here about what is the YouTube channel. So I'll go ahead and post that into into the link, but we should be able to get that to everyone as well.
Tell you what, I'll go ahead and it's if you go to pwnschool.com, there's a link on there for the YouTube channel.
What is that? pwnschool.com?
pwnschool.com. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So it looks like we got a VM to cooperate. And one of the things I've kind of discovered here recently, if anyone's doing any kind of wireless pen testing or getting into that, if you're trying to get the alpha card to work, and if it's not working, I was noticing recently, preparing for a pen test, a wireless pen test, that that SANS uses the Buffalo cards, not Buffalo, Panda cards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm finding out that these alpha cards are getting more difficult to use, that the drivers don't work. And some of the newer ones, I'd use like an older alpha card the other day and found out also now that if you're doing wireless pen testing, really paired OS is the way to go.
Yep.
Okay, let's see.
So we do have a question in Discord. So to be clear, we need Metasploitable 2/3 and a Kali VM. So that's kind of what you recommend.
Yes, that's what I recommend.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's see, we got this to come up here. And as far as virtualization, VMware and VMware or VirtualBox works good, but my advice to give you if you're doing anything wireless related, using VMware works a lot more seamlessly. When you connect your USB devices, it'll prompt you to connect, whereas VirtualBox, you have to do a little more work to get that to work. So if it's an option for you, then I would go with VMware. But you can get by with a lot. I was using it for quite a while without using VirtualBox, and even for my class at Richland College. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep, we can.
Okay. Yeah, one of the kind of the changes with the latest version of Kali 2 is not working as a root user, but if you get tired of typing in passwords, you can do like I did just there, because I'm actually using Parrot for this demo. But yeah, if you use like sudo space su for switch user, then it'll let you run everything as root. But you don't want to do this in any other kind. If you're a blue teamer, you don't want to, of course, you know that you don't want to do that on your systems. Got one more. So what we're going to do here is the first one I was going to run it. I was going to run a net discover, but I'm not going to map out my whole network over the internet. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run Nmap against our target. Could be the first thing we do here. And Metasploitable 2 is what we're going to be targeting. And part of the reason I picked these VMs is, as you're learning, try to hack on your own. But if you get stuck, there's walkthroughs out there. So I kind of encourage you to go through the walkthroughs. So maybe you start out with Metasploitable 2, work through that. And if you need help, do walkthroughs. Then when you move on to Metasploitable 3, try to do it without as much help. Because sometimes, if you just you're not, getting it, then, seeing the way other people do it and seeing some of the walkthroughs, you can find multiple ways of doing it. So we're going to do a service scan as well. And we're going to, the NSE scripts I mentioned, we're going to actually go through a test for the default scripts, which is this syntax right here. And then we're going to use a script, and the vuln script that I mentioned is a good one for that. We're going to set the time, and basically I'm doing this to speed up our scan a little bit. Once you start, it goes up to like T5 or T6. Once you get above T4, you start losing some of the accuracy. You may miss something, so you don't want to scan too fast. And then when your network scan, your vulnerability scans, you want to be careful, because I did a pen test one time using mass scan, because there was a huge number of IP addresses to scan, and I got a little too anxious, too aggressive with the scans, and rebooted a couple firewalls. So you want to be careful when you're using mass scanner, and also kind of be careful in Nmap, especially if you're testing any kind of ICS environments, your OT, your operation technology environments for ICS. So you want to be careful with that, so you don't crash anything. It's a good way to get people mad at you. It's kind of funny. I did a pen test one time, and I was doing my mask scans and rebooted a couple firewalls, and so I got babysit for the rest of the pen test, which ended up not being a bad thing because I made a friend out of it. The guy was really interested in pen testing, so it ended up making the pen test more fun because this was a pen test that required working after hours. So I'd work from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So at least it was good. I had someone to talk to. So we got our syntax out here, and so we're going to output the Nmap scan to a file.
People are saying they can't hear you.
They can't hear? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I'm on the phone, but I don't know. Some of the people are saying they can't hear you.
Yeah, I think people are going to need to connect up and out because I'm going across voice over IP as well. So I'm not on the phone. So it's working that way. I think people just need to reconnect their sessions. Yeah, refresh browser, refresh the client if you have any problems with audio.
Okay.
Not that they would have heard any of what I just said.
But you can put it in the chat to everybody.
Yeah. So anyway, we got our, so this -OA outputs to the three different popular file formats for Nmap. You got the regular Nmap output, so when you cat the file, open up the file, it's going to look like it did on the console. And there's the greppable format that makes it easier to grep for different items within your scan. It could be a really long scan, you need to do that. And then there's the XML version. So with the XML or
sorry about interrupting you, but a couple of the people are saying they hear you just fine. So these are individual problems. If you're having a problem hearing, obviously you're not hearing me say this, but I did put it in. I did put it in the chat, and I will put it in the Discord chat, and I'll stop interrupting you.
That's okay. Not a problem. I'd rather make sure people get situated. So we're going to run our scan here against our target, and this is Metasploitable 2. And the interesting thing about Nmap, this is a pretty good tool, even if you're doing, you like to do CTFs. Sometimes CTFs will have information on that target that you can get through Nmap. Sometimes systems, I don't think intentionally do this, but some capture the flags will put information in Nmap in the system in a way that Nmap is able to enumerate that. So we didn't set the verbosity, so we set it to 1. So this is given smart. Okay, so, and we just did just a default scan. You can do like a full 65,353 port, all TCP ports. You can do all that, scan all those ports, and sometimes you can find things you might not otherwise find, but just kind of for not being bored forever looking at a Nmap scan, and we're going to see it. So we're seeing some open ports, and you can also add like a open tag to it, so it only outputs the open information. So you can increase the verbosity on up to get more information as it goes along. And so if anyone's looking for a really good book to get started in pen testing, Georgia Weidman's book is great. She's working on an update, and one of the things people, this is the information you gain from this book, you'll still be able to learn. So it's kind of, the book's kind of older, but you can still learn from it because hacking a system is hacking a system. Basically, you're going to use different vulnerabilities and different techniques on newer operating systems. Is there a chat feature in here? Okay. And that's the book right there in case anyone needs it. You can share that out if you would, please. So that's a really good book to get started with. That's what I used the first year of my pen testing class, and we ended up moving to the Pen Test Plus later on because it gave students a certification to study for to get a certification. And certifications are good when you're getting your foot in the door of pen testing. You don't necessarily have to have certifications, but it definitely helps when you're getting in. So we're able to see, we see Matilda on here. So that's one of the vulnerable web apps. So there's some, that's the good thing about the vulnerable VMs like Metasploitable. They have so many different vulnerabilities on there that you're able to exploit on there. So I mean, it's typically what you see on Metasploitable 2 or Metasploitable 3 would be like multiple vulnerable VMs. So this is not going to take up as much disk space, and you've got different things to test against. And so you look through here. So what this that vuln script does, it'll find these types of items right here. So we're seeing a CVE for this particular vulnerability. So this is a Diffie-Hellms export cipher downgrade man-in-middle logjam vulnerability. And so you can look up these CVEs and get more information. Let's see, his vulners here, I believe they're actually the ones that creates this vuln script. So you can go to this site and you can go through and look for that vulnerability. And I tell you what, I hadn't used Parrot OS up until here recently, but it's a really, really good operating system, especially for people that are privacy minded. If you just want like an operating system to just surf the internet and be safe, it's got a lot of privacy stuff built in because there's just a standalone Parrot OS without all the pen testing tools in it. But then there's also the version with the pen test tools in it. So those of you that aren't familiar, here's the exploit database. We can actually go through and look up our vulnerabilities through that, or we can use Searchploit, which I'll show you here in just a minute. So here's a version of OpenSSH. I think they've gotten a little better. They may still have the captchas on the Exploit DB website. Come back here. And so here we get in here and we can see the different vulnerabilities. Paste this back up so I can see what version, because so you can go through there and find your vulnerabilities here. And some of them, if you look through, a lot of times you're going to find, you'll see platform and it'll have Metasploit. So some of these are direct Metasploit modules that you can find in there. So any of these in here, this is not the exact version, but you can see the exploits you can download. This is a Python script, so some of these require them to be compiled. And so these files, you can download, or they're actually within exploit DB databases on your systems. Use Searchploit to look for. And so we see the different platforms these run on, and some of these are PHP. And some of these will show up Ruby. Typically, most cases, the Ruby modules are for Metasploit. So also here, since I mentioned the different file formats. So we see the three different file formats I mentioned. It helps when you spell things right. And so here we see what the grippable format looks like. So this is useful if you're trying to grep through looking for certain things. And if you just do the regular Nmap format, then we see exactly the output the way we saw it during that scan, as the scan was happening. And the XML format is really handy for importing into different tools, because Dradis is one of the tools out there that you can. It's a report generation and pen test collaboration tool, and you can import all of your scans into it. And so you can see it's got these tags on there to get it. If you have the right kind of plugins, you can open it up in your browser, and it gives you a nice view of the pen test or the results of your scan, and it's kind of color coded and stuff, which is kind of nice. And there's some tools you can convert it to HTML as well. And so like your grippable format or even these other formats, you can go through, we can grep open to look for open ports. And so this shows us all the open ports. And so you can get really fancy with your scripting and create scripts to pull out information just on certain protocols and stuff. And so here, while we got this screen open in a vulnerability here, search exploit. Okay. Interesting. I just assumed that search exploit would be on Parrot. Okay, let's see if this has something. They've got a, guess maybe they call it something else different on here. But on Kali Linux, you just type in search exploit in the name. This must be some kind of GUI tool. Okay, they don't have it, which is probably a way to install it on here and these other scripts. There's some other scripts I've seen out there too that combine more than the exploit DB together. But typically what you would do is just type in search exploit. Tell you what I'll do here is I will So here you can kind of see an example. They search exploit, you put in the terms and it will come back with a list of vulnerabilities, and you're able to go through and look those up. And so it's a good idea to have this updated. So when you're out on a pen test, if it's kind of hard to get connection to the internet due to some of the controls in the environment, then having that up to date is good. So let's see, there's okay, and here's this VS FTPD backdoor. So there's another. This is another good site. This was like one of the first ones I used to use when I was getting started in pen testing. Was Security Focus. Now they're owned by Symantec. Okay. Since it's Ruby, it looks like it probably be a Metasploit module. So we can search here in vulnerabilities as well. So we're going to use this. So when you find an exploit you want to use, just use exploit. We need to do show options to see what all we need to make this work. So we need the R hosts. So this you can do several at the same time. So we're going to use, and regardless if it's one host or more, you still have to use the R host command. Okay, so show exploits. So we need a payload for this. So there's only one. Exploit completed, but no session created. Okay, so sometimes you have to try it more than once. So we tried exploit again, so we got a shell to it. And so whenever you're doing when you're exploiting a system, if you can get an interpreter session, that is the best, because right here we've got access to the system. There he goes. Okay, so you're not getting, so the shell, this is not interactive. Sometimes you can make shells interactive by putting in a string of Python code, which I don't know if this would help with, would allow us to do that or not, but CID. So we see that we're accessing that system as root. We can also, who am I? The thing I like about ID is when it gets the UID, it'll give you like more information to group it's in and stuff as well. Sometimes who am I works typically on Linux systems and so in most newer Windows systems. So we're able to get onto that system. So we see that that is vulnerable. So we're able to see the Etsy password file, which years ago in Unix and Linux, they used to have like, they would have the password in here too. But now this is just basically shows you the different users and the groups they are in and where their shell starts and all that. So you're able to go through. It's good information if you need a possible target to exploit that system, some other users that you can try to exploit. So doubt this is going to work, but we'll try Etsy shadow. Ooh, so we actually got the shadow file. So you could actually see, these are the hashes. These are the actual hashes of those passwords. So you could take these hashes and crack the hashes. So a lot of cases, typically you'll have access to Etsy password, but not usually Etsy shadow. So this would have been a good one here. So whenever you're working on this on your own, go through and use John the Ripper or Hashcat and try to crack the hashes on there. So we see here we found a vulnerability. We were able to validate that it is vulnerable and exploit it. So this is where you would put your screenshots into your report showing the access you have and who you're accessing it as. A lot of times what I like to do is to prove on the system if it's a command line, a lot of times I'll do ifconfig in there too. So you have to spell it right. So that gives that information. Then you got the IP address associated with it, so that way you can prove what system that you're on. And then while you're doing your pen test, it's a good idea to use a note-taking tool to keep track of what you're finding. So you don't want to lose all this information. So you may see something, you want to record it so you can go back and look at it later. So that's one of the reasons you want to save your Nmap output to file Let's see. So let's see a list down here, but there's like Cherry Tree and Joplin. Keep Note was one of the older version. Joplin's really nice. It's pretty similar to Evernote and OneNote. So you could sit there and put like in your notes, you would create like a node or a folder for each one of the IPs you're testing, and then you would take like your Nmap output, create a note for Nmap. And there's also too, we can we'll go here and we'll look at it. Some web services and see what we have to scan here. Okay, port 80 is open, so we're going to run Nikto. And so here we're able to see this ring Apache 2.2.8, so you can look up and see if there's any vulnerabilities for that. It's also using WebDAV. WebDAV, if it's not secure, that allows you to upload files to a system. So you're able to possibly upload a shell to that system and execute it, or any kind of exploit code that you need. And so as these scans go along, they're showing this session, this PHP session says potentially sensitive information. So this they'll tell you, and so you can look up this open source vulnerability database ID for that information on that. And so we see that this is an outdated version, so this would be something for your pen test report, whether you could exploit it or not. Is it showing this version of Apache is outdated? So it says current version is 2.4.4.37. So this and then this is checking different HTTP methods, HTTP trace and HTTP. So there's some vulnerabilities around trace, but the ones you really want to look for is your puts and deletes. So if you can do puts and deletes, you can actually upload and delete files off the system. So we also see that PHP MyAdmin's on there, so there's probably a good possibility that that's vulnerable, because it's used for managing MySQL databases. So if it's not even, if login's not enforced, you could go in there and possibly get some information on the system. And part of a pen test too, it's not all about getting root. Sometimes it's about the information. It's all the time about the information. They could be customer information there, proprietary company information that you don't want to get in the hands of someone else. So you want to make sure it's protected. So, if you don't have to get domain admin to get that information, that's or even administrator or any kind of restricted access, that's definitely a finding. So credit card numbers, personal information, intellectual property, that kind of stuff is the goal that the malicious actors are after. So we see some different vulnerabilities here. So WebDAV may be, and there's a tool called Cadaver that's really good for uploading files to WebDAV. And another really good tool, I'm not going to run it here, but Responder is a really good tool for collecting, sniffing information on your NTLM traffic and intercepting that and possibly cracking hashes with it, intercepting hashes. So it's just basically a responder. And so yeah, test for LLM&R. And you can, this is interesting too, because you can set, once you set this up on a network, I did a pen test back a couple years ago, a side pen test, and I was able to collect like 53 password hashes, and I was able to crack one of the hashes. And with the hashes too, you don't necessarily have to crack them, you can do pass the hash. So there's several different tools like crack map exec that you can use to pass the hash. And so we see Matilda on here. So there's a lot of good web stuff on here that you can hack on. Okay, so we're able to get to this. So we see the PHP MyAdmin as well. We see damn vulnerable web app and web dev on here. And so you come here, you actually see the login for Metasploitable. There's nothing there, so Matilda. So you can go here and there's all sorts of stuff you can test against. So the thing that's nice about this Metasploitable is you can attack this like you found a system on the network that's got web services. So whatever you can exploit there could end up giving you command line access like we have through Meterpreter. So you may be able to get that through the web layer. And all these things are, you see all these apps that are installed on here, so there's a good chance there's probably some kind of vulnerable. So you got damn vulnerable web app. This is another good one to work on your web hacking skills. And so you can see here we got the login information. You have Pro FTPD. Go back here and look at our version, make sure we get the right version. So some here you see the ranges. So we tried to go directly to the version information, but if we scroll down towards the bottom of the page, we can see that this is, some of these could be vulnerable up to, let's see, is there any vulnerable up to 3.1? No, but there's ranges. So sometimes you have to kind of look through because it won't go to the exact version. Don't know about y'all, but I'm not a big fan of the CAPTCHAs. Sometimes you feel like you've got everything in there and you just miss something. Okay, now the browser's just bear with me. My screen is locked up here. It's not liking this VM, or the VM's not liking this page.
So Discord's blowing up. Everybody's totally feeling your pain right now with this CAPTCHA nightmare. So just want to throw
Okay.
that out there. There's a lot of people that are rooting for you.
Man, they really got these things made that I don't even, good gosh, these CAPTCHAs anymore are just crazy. That well, my screen kind of like got locked up.
Yeah, it's straight up torture. Somebody said there's probably a bus in the sky you're missing.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, my gosh. I guess they figure if it's a security site, they frustrate the bad guy enough that they'll just give up and not hack the
Well,
site.
most secure site is one you can't get to. Period.
Yeah, true.
All right, so just make sure everyone knows we're still on. Everything's still going. He's just resetting.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to reset this VM. It's just not going to.
So everybody else knows, this is real world.
Yeah, man.
When you start doing pen testing, you are going to run into some weird problems, let me tell you.
That's right.
I can tell you in general, I've been having a bad tech week. It seems like anything technology-wise is just being a challenge.
So there was a couple questions out here. Maybe I can throw a couple at you while you're going through this.
Okay.
There was a question. Somebody was having some problems with how long it took for Searchploit to pop back some results. And they were talking about, do you have to use sudo when using Searchploit? Just didn't know what your thoughts were.
I don't believe you have to use sudo for the newer version. No, because I've used the newer version and I've used it and it hasn't. It could be just maybe there's just a lot of information is trying to pull back that, or either they may need to do an update. Maybe the exploit DB is corrupted or something.
Yeah.
But it's just files. But I would say maybe that I would update some. See if you can update, just do an apt update and it'll update everything for you.
Gotcha. And then one other one was specific arguments on Nmap. Now I know you don't have a command line in front of you, but somebody was asking if you can go over what the arguments that you were using. Because I know you were talking about the T4, that you didn't want to go much more above that because it's too fast and you get weird results. Just, I don't know if that's something you could throw off the top of your head.
Yeah, T4 is going to be, it controls the speed. You can go up to, I think it goes up to T6, but once you start getting above T4, then you start running into, you'll start missing stuff. So you don't want to miss any ports or anything. And then I did the -PN, which is to not probe. And I do that by default because a lot of times when you do an Nmap scan, you don't get information back. It'll come back and say if you use -PN, you might be able to find something. Otherwise, you're not finding it. So I use that by default. Lowercase s, uppercase v is for the version. And then the lowercase s, uppercase c is for the default scripts. So what it does is Nmap, as it's scanning, it will go through whatever services it finds. It'll run the NSC scripts against that. So if it's finding a lot of HTML related, HTTP related stuff, then it'll run more stuff against that. If it's Windows, then it'll start throwing some SMB related stuff at it. So that's what that does. And then the script that I ran with it, the dash script space vuln, it looks for the specific vulnerabilities and gives us the open source vulnerability database, or CVEs, for those vulnerabilities.
And then -OA is just the adapter.
That's for the output.
Output,
so
yeah.
You output to a file, and it's lowercase o and uppercase a, and that gives you the three formats. That gives you the Nmap format, greppable format, and the XML. And the XML format's good because you can import it into other tools, like Dradis is one of the tools that you can do. It's used to create reports as well as collaborate with other pen testers.
Gotcha. Thanks for that.
Oh, you're welcome. So we can go back, and that's one of the nice things about when you run your scripts. Like if your system crashes, and then you got your Nmap output, so we can go back and look at those files. That's one of the reasons you want to save the files. And also another good thing too is if you're running something and you're doing a network pen test, or you're using a remote system, the screen command is good to use. Because what the screen does is if you're using a remote system, you're SSH'd into another system or remotely connected, and you're running a scan, and if it dies, you lose everything. But if you use the screen command, you can go back and reconnect as long as the server didn't crash. Let's see here.
And last one, just while you're popping some stuff up, what do you recommend as a solid methodology / standard for reporting findings?
Let's see. The CVV database out there, you can actually it rates the risks of the vulnerabilities. it maps the vulnerabilities. That would be good. But as far as methodology, the PTES standard there, but like I think it's CVV. That's usually what they use to rank the vulnerabilities. Let me see if I get anything to come up. Tell you what, we have to let this sit for a while, but maybe bring up a browser and here's the book I was talking about earlier. That's a good one to get started with. Okay, yeah, the CVSS scoring. So you come to CVE details. This is a good way to score, rank risk your vulnerabilities. And with the web app, it's that the OWASP makes it pretty nice because OWASP has that out there. And so yeah, you can so you go through. I think there should be something on here to let you score your findings. So there's like a so yeah, you can use the CVSS score, and I think version 3 is the latest version. So that's a good one to score on that.
So what are your thoughts on how much networking you need to know to be successful in doing these types of pen tests?
Yeah, as far as like referred to certs, and here's kind of a good thing to follow. If you're starting out new and you don't have experience in IT or technology, then I would start with something like the A+, learn the operating systems, and then go to the Network Plus. But as far as networking goes, mainly your targets are typically going to be servers, workstations, any kind of computing system on a network. And so having a sysadmin level of technical ability, I would say, would be good to achieve, because that means, you're going on your Linux system or your Windows system, and you're able to connect to networks, and you're able to understand like basic routing. So if you're not able to connect to a system, you can do trace routes to see where you're missing out. And some of those things that like the command line is good to know as far as like Windows and Linux, because if you get a shell to a system and you don't know the command line, you're going to be doing a lot of Googling, and it's going to slow down what you need to do. So if you know the command line, then you can possibly shut down firewalls, do different sysadmin level commands on a system. But as far as networking goes, you don't necessarily have to know Cisco, although if you were to breach a Cisco system, then it would be important to know. But just your basic networking, be able to connect systems on a network, and set up your network configurations on devices that you're using and devices you connect to. So you don't have to go out, be full-blown elite level Cisco. You have to be a CCIE, but just something along the lines of like, you go out to like Professor Messer. He's got a lot of videos out there, and I know someone, actually one of the best pen testers I know, when he started out, he didn't have the opportunity to take SANS courses and stuff. So what he did was he went through like Professor Messer. He built VMs, was learning like Security Onion and all those different platforms to learn networking. But he went through like the Professor Messer videos to learn networking and operating systems. and security, because you got the Security Plus and Network Plus.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have those certifications, but having that knowledge is helpful. And so you really just kind of give you, an idea. You need to be able to understand the technology, to secure the technology, and to break into the technology. So you need to know the security and the technology, and you have to know everything. This field is pretty broad. There's a lot of things to learn, but as long as once you get a good base knowledge, then you can expand those concepts and learn other areas.
Yeah, that's the key. The foundation is so crucial. Layer 2 through 4, understanding ports, understanding, how layer 2 networks will operate, and some of the different protocols. I mean, that's really the foundation that everything builds on.
Yes. Yeah, that is not coming back up on this.
So next time, more chickens.
Yeah, more chickens. Well,
Yeah.
next. Yeah, one of the things that'll help for next time is I'm trying to get away from the labs that we use at the college where I teach, and so I'm trying to get away from those because I have to have someone else set those up for each semester. So if I want any updates to it, I don't have access to update stuff, and so I'm thinking about doing something, putting the stuff in the cloud to manage myself.
Mm.
So that way, plus I was looking at try hack me to set up labs in the future. Then at workshops, people have access directly to it, and they don't have to. So here's some different stuff out here on some different resources. If you go to my website, there's some different books and stuff out there. And like the penetration testing, a hands-on introduction to hacking, I would start out with that. And then like the hacker playbook 2 and 3, I would graduate to that next.
Mm-hmm.
And with don't skip version 2, because version 3 gets into more red teaming and you'll miss out on some of the network pen testing pieces there. And then the web application hackers handbook is great for web application pen testing. And then the red team field manual is a good resource for different command line syntax and stuff around Cisco and Windows and Linux and some of the different tools. And these are some different resources I hear. These first ones up here are not free,
Mm-hmm.
but they rank from the most expensive down to the least expensive. And here are some free resources, especially if you're interested in bug bounties. Bug Crowd and HackerOne have good resources for learning web app pen testing. And then the SANS pen test blog. If you go there, they've got cheat sheets on Nmap. So you go out there, sign up to you'll start getting their brochures in the mail. But then once a year they put out this pen testing poster, and it's got like different tools or different techniques and stuff. So that's a good place there. This hackingtutorials.org, this is a really good place for learning like Nmap and stuff like that. I mean, it's like Nmap and Metasploit.
Mm.
So here you see some of the different hacking tutorials. So you see up here, you got wireless, you got like Metasploit.
Mm.
So this is different tutorials on how to use the different tools. So that's a really good place to learn.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, and because I get this all the time about people that are constantly saying, okay, well, how do I start? Because they get so overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
I think that the most important thing to understand is just don't get overwhelmed. Try to find a bite-sized amount, build yourself a plan, and start tackling these topics. Start small. Start with something that you can get access to that's free, and then start building your base of knowledge. It might take you a few years to get there, but if you do it methodically, you will get there.
Yeah, build a home lab, and that's pretty simple, as running some VMs on your local system, or you can, get as complex as you want, but a home lab, getting the hands-on is a good experience. And like you said, learn in small pieces. That way you absorb it, because one of the things I see a lot of times is people want, and another thing is plan your goals out, have short-term and long-term goals. If you want to be a pen tester, I don't ever discourage anyone from not doing it, because some people come up and they need a little more skills, a little more knowledge, and so I just encourage them, because some people, I know that their very first job in security or technology was pen testing. That's not going to happen all the time,
Right.
but it can be done if you want to work hard enough. But it's, like anything in security or technology, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to kind of start out and just continue to learn, and you'll get there. And just be patient with yourself too. Some people are not patient. You just have to be patient. It takes a while to learn. Once you've seen something taught several times over, then you're going to, next time you see it, someone explains it different, or you've got a better understanding. So the more times you see it, the better you understand it. So you just have to give yourself patience and give yourself time.
That's exactly right. You got to fight the burnout, because that's something that we struggle with in technology. It can seem so overwhelming, but if you take it in bite-sized chunks, you build yourself a plan, you'll get there.
Yeah, sometimes unplug from it. If you've been studying too hard, take a break. I mean, you see these coding challenges, 100 days of code. That's good and you'll learn, but you just can't stay busy 365 days a year forever. You've got to take a break every now and then, or you get to where you hate it. So you
That's
have
right.
to take your breaks. And so yeah, it's just, yep, and just build that base, because the better you learn it, the better. And a good example that I can give that I share with my students each semester since I heard about this, I know a guy that he was a reverse engineer. He went to work as a pen tester, and he took assembly in college, but he just did enough to pass the class. He didn't learn it. So now working in the industry, he had to go back and learn assembly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Language. So it's like if he would have done it then. And so that's what I tell students, if you're going through college, your art appreciation, if you're going to be in security or music appreciation, may not help you, but your networking classes, your operating system classes, your Python coding classes, this is stuff you're going to use. Try to learn it, because you're spending the time to do it, and it'll come in helpful later on.
What do you think about, and what's your view on the best entry-level pen test cert? EJPT or Pen Test Plus, or those any that you think are worthwhile?
EJPT, I think, I like better because you're doing hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get to learn that. You learn security courses are really good. But yeah, I would do that because you're going to actually learn how to do a pen test. Your CEH and Pen Test Plus, the CEH focuses a lot on tools and not really necessarily doing pen test. The thing I like about Pen Test Plus is it gets more into methodology, and it's not just the tools. Which Pen Test Plus, between that, you're trying to learn pen testing between Pen Test Plus and CEH, you're going to learn more from the Pen Test Plus. But the EJPT, that's a good one to start with, because you're going to learn pen testing, so you actually do pen testing in the course. So that's a really good one to start with. I've known people that have started out with that was their path into becoming OSCPs.
Mm-hmm.
They started out with the EJPT and then studied a little bit and then went on to like the OSCP. But OSCP is a good cert, but one of the things I'll say too is get a little experience. Learn this before you get into that. You'll learn a lot in that class, but there's good if you don't have the basics, get that built up first before you start it, because it's not an entry level cert. Some people will say one thing is, some people say it's entry level pen test, but that's when you compare it to like Pen Test Plus or CEH, is not really. But as far as someone that's experienced pen tester, it's not as difficult. But I've seen people with self-taught, no formal education in technology, do the OSCP, work hard on it, and get through it. So if you're wanting to do that, you don't have experience, definitely spend some time with the EJPT and some of these other courses and labs and stuff before you go on.
Yeah, I think the certs are very valuable just from the perspective of it's a learning path. Regardless of what your thoughts are on certs and, experience versus certs, experience always trumps. But certs are a great way to build a learning path, and also to be able to show, some credibility unless you already, have your name out there, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely helps to get your foot in the door. Otherwise, it's hard to get your foot in the door without the cert, because you got no experience. How do you get in? So usually the certs get you in there, and it's going to depend on the employer. Some people I really haven't been seeing for pen testing a requirement for degrees. Some people look for certifications. The ones I see most often is like the OSCP, OSCE, the GPIN from SANS, or the GXPN from SANS, or the SANS GWAPT. Those, once you're in it, but as far as entry level, CEH will get your foot in the door. And if companies are doing business with the government, then the CEH, as well as like the CISSP, or on the DoD list of certs.
That's
and
right.
Sometimes they're requirements to get contracts. So having those sometimes can get your foot in the door. It's not necessarily going to help you be a better pen tester, but it's a matter about getting your foot in the door.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I'm going to give up on the demo, that we can just continue on with questions. Anyone has questions? Otherwise,
that sounds good. So go ahead and pop into the questions on the webinar. So if you can, just go to the Q&A and pop in a question. I'll make sure that that we get it answered. I've been trying to keep an eye on what's going on in Discord as well. There was a comment in Discord, if you're not seeing it, that the EJPT is actually on sale right now. So they're offering some discounts on that. So, when in quarantine, start training.
And one of the things I'll say, compared to, because I've taken courses through Pentester Academy. Those are really good courses, and they've got stuff that fits all level. They really try to cater towards people getting started, make sure that there's content there for them. But one of the things I'll say, like the e-learn security, the EJPT, compared to like offensive security, if you're just getting started out, the Pentester Academy, the e-learn security stuff goes into more detail than like the OSCP. So it's like, they've improved on the OSCP. They've added more detail to it than used to before. You definitely, even if you had experience, you'd need a prep up front before taking the class, but they go into a lot of good detail. So it's like, if you've got like zero pen testing experience, or you don't have people to talk to about it, it takes you from the beginning and explains in enough detail with hands-on labs. So it's a really good way to get started.
That's awesome. Well, it doesn't look like I have any more questions popping up through here. So last chance, guys, on guys and gals and everyone out there, please pop in some questions. But if not, unless you had something else.
Yeah, people can reach me on Twitter. I just gave you my Twitter account. My Twitter, not my account, my
yeah, don't give me your
Twitter.
account.
Nah.
Who knows what you'll see.
Also, they can reach me on LinkedIn too. And this is kind of how I got started into teaching and doing conference stuff, was just from, sharing information. So if anyone wants to, has any questions later on after this over, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of answering questions and referring people to information and stuff.
So there's one question we just got on Discord. Any advice for someone finishing school in the next few years? Projects, ideas to work on in their free time?
Yeah, if you're in college, try to see if you can get an internship, because that's one thing I've seen that's helped people get their foot in the door. Also, maybe, bug bounties are good. If you're interested in, some of the bug bounties, they offer more than just web. Some of them have mobile, IoT, and automobile vehicle bug bounties. So that's kind of a way to get started, get experience. But yeah, the internships, if you can do that, that's a really good way to get started. Because the biggest thing when you're getting out in the field, a lot of people I see that didn't get internships, it's harder to get in. So if you've been through an internship, at least you've got some experience to show. So look at that. Look at some of the different open source projects. OWASP has a lot of things. So if you want to code on that, like AMAS, which Jeff Foley, he's presenting here today, I believe, on AMAS. So they're always looking for people to help contribute to that project, just like OWASP Zap. So just get out there and get on Twitter, and there's a large number of people from the community out there on Twitter. They refer to as InfoSec Twitter, so it's a good place to learn.
Yeah. But
yeah, working on bug bounties, if you got a home lab and you know how to hack things and understand the methodology, and if you get an interview and you can describe that, sometimes you can get a job. When I got my first pen test job, my background was I'd run vulnerability scanners. I've worked in AppSec and network security, had a sysadmin background, so I didn't have a pen testing background. But part of what helped me is I had a home lab, and he saw that I was willing to learn on my own. A lot of times what people run into the corporate world is some people only want to learn when they're on the clock and they won't do it
Right.
on their own. So companies are looking for people they're wanting to learn because if you
Yeah.
enjoy what you do, and you're going to make a better employee.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, you see so much more where people are looking for passion as opposed to an 8 to 5 type deal. So there's lots of different ways. I mean, GitHub is a resume anymore. So if you're involved in helping, if you've got some coding chops and you can help to expand some of these open source projects, it's always great things. What do you think about the masters in cybersecurity? Is it worth it? Is it good to go that direction? What type of
I think
advice?
people, I think people getting started out, it may be a good idea because right now, since there's a security shortage, once industry gets enough people, because like Ernest and Young recently uh, did away with the 4-year degree requirement. Used to, you had to have a bachelor's to
Hmm.
work for Ernest and Young, but they did away with that because there's such a shortage of security people. But I think if the industry ever starts to catch up, where there's more people in the industry and there's less of a
Hmm.
shortage, then they start getting picky again. So
Yeah.
if you're wanting to move into management, it's probably good to have. And if you ever want to teach, a lot of,
It's a
I
requirement.
teach at a community college. Yeah, it's a requirement to have at least a master's.
Yeah. My thoughts are, and again, you take this for whatever it is, everybody has opinions, but there's an opportunity for people to be able to earn some money, get some experience. If you went straight through school and only were in the academic world and only, ever had that level of experience, even getting out with a master's degree, you might not have that much opportunity unless you did some big projects, right?
That's
You might
true.
not have that many opportunities to get jobs. So, play it by ear, figure out if the masters actually make sense. But I see a lot of people get into college and they're like, well, I've gone for 4 years, I'm comfortable here, and I don't feel like going into the big world just yet. So let's get a master's, and then they end up with debt. So just think about that when you're going through your planning.
If you want to do the master's, here's the thing to do. Get your bachelor's degree done and then go to work for someone, have them pay for your master's.
Amen. That's
Yep.
right.
Yep. And they'll do it. A lot of companies pay for it. And one of the things not to overlook, if you're looking at masters and stuff, if you do like a master's, in security, then you may do like a dual major and get an MBA, because the business knowledge that's important. That's the thing that I'm lacking the most. Whenever people that I work with, the one area that I'm really know nothing about is the business side. So that's something not to discount either.
Yeah, that's a great point. So my background, heavy technical, but I actually have a bachelor's in business. And I tell you what, it has, when you're talking to C-level, if you can translate and speak their language, life is very different as a technical person. So it's almost like I put on my mask and go talk to them and pretend, but it works, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because there's a lot of time they're trying to justify stuff, and people with a business background, they're able to write documents to justify things better. They understand, the business requirements better. So I mean, it's good to have. And along those lines too, is while you're learning, is make sure you work on your writing skills,
Oh,
because communication skills are big. Be able to write properly. I mean, you don't want to write like you're sending a text message. You want to make sure you use proper grammar and capitalization and punctuation, all that stuff. So I got into the industry without a degree.
yeah.
I went to like a Novell NetWare CNE training course, and I got into the industry, and it was back around the .com boom. So they were
Right.
looking for a lot of sysadmin folks. So I got in there. I didn't have a degree, but I ended up later on going and getting my associate's degree because the college offered credit for certifications. So I got credit for my MCSC, CISSP, and then even like Cisco CCNA. So I had a bunch of tech certs, and they gave me credit for it. But it was worth going back to school, because English composition, learning to write, I learned so much from that class that I've got more out of that than anything I took in college.
That's right. That's right. It's so funny because on Discord, people are like, "What's a CNE?" So
Yeah,
all us old people that started out before, before there was actually like programs in college, it's so funny. But yeah, I think it's different now. It's definitely requires that you have more, there's their credentialing, but I think at the end of the day, the experience is the key thing. So whatever you do, make sure you're out there. Make sure you're out there using these skills. You're finding opportunities to intern because that's what's going to pay off the most.
yeah. Before I forget this too, here's another thing, and I was about to forget about it, but do talks, go present at your local meetups and
Hmm.
your B-sides conferences and stuff. We had a guy that at our local DEF CON group, the guy was a recent college grad. A hiring manager from Citibank was there and saw his talk on digital forensics.
Hmm.
He saw his presentation and asked for the guy's resume, and the guy got hired.
See, that's
So
perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because think about it. If you're doing a pen test, where's the money? The money is in the presentation, right? It's
yeah,
the findings and the results. So if you can speak and you've got those capabilities, the jobs definitely are a lot easier to get there.
yep. And if you
Oh,
have a hard time with public speaking, Toastmasters is a great way. I
yeah.
don't claim to be a good speaker, but I was terrified to speak in public until I went through Toastmasters. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely, and from somebody that has a theater background, so actually, that's kind of how I got started in doing a lot of these types of things. Take an improv class. If you can actually get into a room and you can get in front of people and you can do improv and things like that, that's an
yeah,
opportunity where you can really master the ability to not always feel like you either have to be saying something or that you're not able to put your thoughts together in a way that people can understand. So all these things are great skills.
yeah, that's good because it's interesting because one of the best speakers I know of is the pastor, actually retired pastor from my church. He was big in theater
Hmm.
and he was a storyteller. So man, if you can, and when you mentioned the improv, that's one of the nice things about Toastmasters is they have an improv portion of the meeting where they will come up with a subject and you got to talk on that subject for 2 minutes. It could be something ridiculous or something you have no idea about, but you've got to talk for 2 minutes. And so it really teaches you to think on your feet. So
Yeah.
it's not as good as taking the improv class, but you kind of get some of the same exposure.
That's awesome. What do you? So it looks like we had one more question regarding programming languages. So everybody hears about Python. Python's really, really hot right now. What are your thoughts from a programming perspective?
Yeah, Python is good, and I definitely would. That one's, it's been popular for a while. There's a lot of libraries out there written in Python, but another one that's good is Golang.
Yep. Yep. Google's
And
language.
yeah, I saw that, and I've been taking courses on that myself. And the reason I got into the programming part is I saw the book came out, Black Hat Go,
Hmm.
and one of the things about it compared to Python is you can compile it, so you can, and it's cross-platform, so you can compile it on Linux or Mac and run it on Windows. So you can cross-compile it on an operating system that's not going to run on Windows. So
Right.
if you're doing a pen test, you need to write something, then you can compile it to run on Windows. So Golang is pretty big. I mean, BetterCap is written. It's a man-in-the-middle tool. It's written in Golang. AMAS is written in Go. Jeff Foley is a big fan of it, the creator of AMAS.
Hmm.
So that's a good one. Python or Golang.
Yeah, Rust is also really, really getting popular. So, if you're kind of on the cutting edge, Rust is really starting to make itself known because of the just the inherent memory security. So a lot of the things that we do from a buffer overflow perspective, Rust has a lot of things built into it as a language that help to protect against a lot of that stuff. So worth looking at, but definitely the most popular would be Python, Go, JavaScript, and standard HTML. Knowing those types of things also helps, especially if you're doing any pen testing on websites or those types of platforms. It really just kind of depends.
And then once you learn how to code or learn a little bit about it, a lot of times you'll get exploit code, and if you have to run it, sometimes you have to alter it.
Hmm.
And so understanding, just to be able to modify programs and scripts is very helpful too.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think we've hit most of the questions. Yep, looks like we're good. So I can't thank you enough. I mean, I guess at this point you didn't have anything else to cover. We're just kind of doing a Q&A, but
Nope.
I can't thank you enough. I think it was a wonderful session. Appreciate you being here and representing. And please, guys and gals and everyone else, reach out. Let us know what we can do to improve this. And you guys have contact information for everyone. And you know, excellent job today, Philip.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Awesome. Well, sounds good. Thank you so much. So everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. So this particular session is Pawning Networks, an introduction to network pen testing. So I don't know about you, but I'm excited about seeing this one. This particular session is going to cover a lot of great hands-on tools. And as we were talking about, you've got an excellent instructor here. So please, if you will, use the chat. If you've got some questions, I'm going to be helping moderate. So if you can't see some of your questions, he'll ping me and he'll say, hey, do we have anything? And I can ask him some of your questions. Also use Discord. Discord we're heavily using this year to make sure that we get an opportunity to chat and have good conversations. So without further ado, Philip Wiley is going to be educating you on pawning networks through pen testing. So take it away, my friend.
Hey, thanks for the warm introduction, and welcome everyone to this session. Hope everyone is enjoying the conference. So far, Joseph's been known to put on some really good conferences, and we're fortunate to have all these virtual conferences with the social isolation. The previous conference that Joseph did back in May, I guess, or so, was pretty cool, and also got the Red Team Village coming up in August, I guess, around DEF CON time. But at any rate, thank you for joining. Not only do I work as a pen tester, I've been working as a dedicated pen tester for a little over 8 years now. Had my OSCP for a little over 7 years, but I'm the Red Team lead at a large global consumer products manufacturing company. And I'm also the adjunct professor at Richland College. I teach ethical hacking and web app pen testing there. I like to teach workshops and plan to do more in the future. So just keep your eyes out, hopefully come up with some new topics. And tomorrow, if you haven't registered, I'm doing a web app pen testing workshop tomorrow. And these are entry-level introduction courses to teach you some of the basics and how to get into, get started in pen testing. And I'll share some educational resources. But I'm also the founder of the Pwn School Project, which is an educational meetup, which started out was mainly offensive security topics, but it's kind of changed over the years. I mean, we've only been around almost 2 years, but it's changed as time's gone on because there were a lot of people trying to get into security in general, so we don't restrict it to just hacking type of talks. We expanded it past that, but we have our recordings online on our YouTube page, and we stream 2 meetings a month, so that information's out there. So I've been in IT and information security for a little over 22 years. I'm also the co-host of the Uncommon Journey podcast with Alyssa Miller and Chloe Mustagi, and I was one of the people interviewed for the Tribe of Hackers Red Team book. So what really got me into presenting at conferences and doing workshops was my passion to share and teach. When I got into, after I've been in pen testing a while, some people wanted to ask me questions on how to study for the OSCP, so I started sharing information. So that got me interested in teaching, so I'm able to do that on a broader scale now. And so we're going to cover some methodology, go over some methodology information here. And so if you haven't checked out, pentest-standard.org is for the PTEST standard, the Penetration Testing Execution Standard. And this is a really great standard to go by for your pen testing. This takes you from beginning to end of the pen test, and it's written by a lot of great people that you've probably heard of in the industry. Dave Kennedy is one of the writers. from Trusted Sec, as well as Carlos Perez from Trusted Sec, Joe McCrae that does a lot of training at conferences and online, and numerous others. So this was built by experts in the industry. It wasn't just someone that put together a list that wasn't experts. It was people that actually have been doing this in the field hands-on, and some of the best around. And also some other good methodologies and information to look at is the OWASP Top 10 and the OWASP Testing Guide. So these, if you need to learn a little more about web app pen testing, these are good resources there and a good place to learn the OWASP Top 10. If you want to get into pen testing, one of the things you'll go through in a job interview is notoriously the vulnerabilities that you get asked about, whether it's specializing in web app pen testing or just a normal generalist pen test job where your main focus is going to be networks. They're still going to ask you about SQL injection and cross-site scripting, the different types, and how to remediate. So just knowing those are really good for interviews, just knowing that information. And so the P-TEST methodology, you have your pre-engagement interactions, intelligence gathering, threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, exploitation, post-exploitation, and reporting. But as you're getting started out as a pen tester, a lot of the pre-engagement interactions are going to be ran by practice leads or engagement managers. They're going to work with clients to collect information to scope a pen test. And so as a pen tester, you'll be more likely involved on like the kickoff calls and some of the meetings for the pen test. But typically when you're getting started out, someone else is running those, collecting that information. So when you're getting started, you're gonna be more focused on intelligence gathering down through reporting. And in this, we're going to focus more on intelligence gathering, not so much on threat modeling, but vulnerability analysis and exploitation, and discuss post-exploitation and reporting. Threat modeling, some of this is just, as you learn to pen test, a lot of this just comes naturally. You kind of, from hacking systems and doing pen tests, you kind of know the areas to look for. So like in your more advanced targets, like if you're wanting to test like an ATM machine, then that gets a little more tricky, because then you're looking at, not only you're looking at the ways you can hack the system, you're also looking at the environments this system's hosted in. So if you're looking at an ATM machine that resides somewhere out in the country that's no one is monitoring it 24 hours a day, there's not a lot of traffic, then physical attacks are going to be more likely. Whereas if it's in a heavily populated place, more your logical type of attacks, less trying to break into it physically, are going to occur. So you're taking that target, and you're also taking in consideration the environment. And so this, you go through and you'll look at what you're testing, you'll look at the different threat surfaces that you can possibly attack, and try to kind of map out your pen test. Because where you're doing application or network, it's really not as big of a requirement. It's kind of a little more loosely done. In your vulnerability analysis, you're going through any information you've collected during your intelligence gathering and seeing if there's anything that's vulnerable, as well as doing any kind of scanning to collect more information. Exploitation is where you're actually hacking into the system. So this is where the fun part starts. So you go through and hack the system, and post-exploitation is what you can do past exploiting that one system.
Hey, Philip.
Yes.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you, buddy. The slides are not advancing. So if you're on the first slide, that's all we're seeing. We're actually just seeing your slide sorter view.
Can you see it now?
No, it hasn't updated yet.
Okay, let me go back and reshare this.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, let me just go ahead.
All right, sorry about that, folks.
So that way you can see the URLs. And after, message me on Discord. I'm pretty frequent on that Discord, so you can send me a direct message or message me in the chats in general. But here are the resources that I was mentioning there: the pen test standard, OWASP Top 10. And these are really good resources, and they're referred in a lot. And here's the P-TEST methodology. As I said, we're going to be focusing more on from the intelligence gathering down to the post-exploitation And kind of a simplified methodology. This is just very basic. Your intelligence gathering, your reconnaissance against an exploitation, and within that post-exploitation as well. So your intelligence gathering, you're gathering information against your target, and this could be going to, if it's externally facing, then you've got companies like Netcraft that have online sites that you can look up information on targets, mainly web application based or websites. You can find out what system it's being hosted on, what all frameworks are running on it. Is this IIS running ASPX, or is this a Apache Tomcat server running Java server pages? So you're able to collect that information. And Shodan's another good tool to use during this phase. I was doing a pen test several years ago as a full scope pen test, more of an adversary simulation, because everything was open, including physical and any kind of social engineering, any of that type of stuff. And so doing a look up in Shodan, topic, IP addresses and stuff, I was able to look up network blocks and find out IP addresses that were in scope. We only knew the address of the company, the name of the company, so we had to really research to find any IP addresses to test. And during that test, I was able to find a FTP header on an FTP server that wasn't listed in any of those blocks. And how I found it is Shodan found like a banner for the FTP server, and I was able to find that server. So that was a clear text FTP server on the internet. And so Shodan was able to find this. So your reconnaissance and your OSINT is very, very helpful. Going through LinkedIn, different social media platforms, looking up information. So if you see openings for, sysadmins or DevSecOps people, network people, then a lot of times you'll see what systems they're requiring you to understand. So if they're a Cisco shop, they're going to be looking for Cisco certifications or experience in different Cisco products. So you can go through there and find that information, and possibly even find versions of the software and stuff they're running, as well as if you look up people that work for the company, they may have in their job description all the things they do. They want this populated because if they're in the market for a job or they're looking to upgrade, then their information's out there. So sometimes they give a lot of detail, so this could be used during your pen test. So the more information you collect there, the better. And once you move on to the targets and you're on the network, your Nmap scans and your vulnerability scans can collect more information on those targets. So the more information you collect, the more chances you have of hacking into something. So this is kind of going from like, you look at the different types of target knowledge. And so you look at more of an adversarial type simulation, or a lot of your pen tests you'll have like IP addresses or a domain name, and that's it. And you test from there. So the more information you collect on it, the more knowledge that you've got to attack that target. That's like if you took someone that works for the company doing internal pen tests, then they understand the environment better than a consultant would, or a contractor coming in to test the environment. So they've already collected information. So it's up to someone from the outside that's not part of that company to do a lot more manual collection to be able to test that system. And so there's different types of open source intelligence. You have passive, semi-passive, and active. So your passive is collecting from the sites like LinkedIn, something that's not touching that target. And then like Netcraft, semi-passive, you're starting to get into your DNS lookups and stuff, and really high level scans. And you get into your active information gathering where you're doing your port scans and stuff. This kind of gets more into your reconnaissance and less away from OSINT specific. So like we said, collecting information is going to help you be more successful on your target. And that's one of the things too. If you're studying for the OSCP, one of the big things that people mess up on when they attempt the exam, maybe they'll pass it the first time around, is they didn't collect enough information. So that's what you want to do. So this comes into play like in your vulnerability analysis. We're doing more of this information. You're doing port scanning, service scanning, application OS enumeration, and vulnerability detection. So while your vulnerability scanners like Nexpose, OpenVAS, and Nessus find those vulnerabilities, it's also good to know how to manually collect that information. So how to manually detect those vulnerabilities, because there's times one vulnerability scanner will find something that another one doesn't, and vice versa. And sometimes some manual tools will find things like Nikto, for instance. I've ran Nikto on several pen tests, and it's a command line tool for testing web servers and web applications. And I've been able to find like default credentials and stuff through one of those scans that Nessus didn't pick up. So the more tools you have, the better. So you want to use all tools available to you and keep an open mind, constantly learning new things. And so vulnerability analysis, you're looking at for the network, you're looking at port and service scanning with Nmap. Typo on there, it should be Nmap, not Nmap, but Nmap and MassScan. Also, the Metasploit framework, there's a lot of auxiliary scanners in there that you can do to look for anonymous FTP and different vulnerable services. So that's a really good tool to have your disposal. It's not always about exploitation with Metasploit. There's a lot of discovery that you can do with that. And then your NSE scripts, your Nmap scripting engine scripts. The Vuln script in particular is nice because you're able to go through and run your scans. And what Vuln does is Vuln will run a script and looks for vulnerabilities, and it'll actually look for the open source vulnerability database numbers, so you can look up more information and possibly look up exploits for those vulnerabilities. And then your vulnerability scanning is important. If you're doing a pen test, you hear people before they get into the industry, they think vulnerability scanning is cheating. But what happens on a pen test is you typically don't have enough time to do it all manually. So your vulnerability scanners, they're able to detect stuff easily. So you want the low-hanging fruit, the stuff you can find quickly. That way you can get that out of the way, and you can find some information there that you're able to focus your attacks closer. Like I said, the manual testing is important as well, but you don't want to rule out using your vulnerability scanners. And also for the web, there's your dynamic application, your DAST, your dynamic application security testing scanners, which AppScan, WebInspect, Acunetics, NetSparker, and Arachne. And the commercial version of Burp Suite has a vulnerability scanner built in, as well as OWASP Zap has a built-in vulnerability scanner for web application. Although, the focus of this is network, when you're doing testing, the endpoint solutions companies are getting